Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webcast, JD Edwards Orchestrator Installation and Configuration. My name is Brooke Bacon, Marketing Lead with GSI, and I'm also very pleased to welcome our main presenter, John Bassett, EVP of Managed Services with GSI. And now before we get started, I want to give you a chance to review our Safe Harbor Statement. And now for a quick overview of today's meeting, which will last about 60 minutes. First, we would like to take a moment to go over a couple of housekeeping items as well as provide a brief company overview. Then I will turn it over to John to get into our main presentation, which will last about 40 minutes. Then we will take a minute to go over upcoming educational events, and then we will wrap up with a 10-minute question and answer session. If you would like to submit a question, you can do so through the questions panel at the bottom of the GoToWebinar console window located on the right side of your screen. Please note that all questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. So if you'd like to minimize your GoToWebinar console during the presentation, just click the right-facing arrow key on the top left of the console. Clicking the left arrow key will return the console so that you can input your questions. And now I'd like to give you a brief overview of GSI. GSI is a full-service JD Edwards consulting organization. We're an Oracle Platinum partner that was founded in 2004 and now has over 100 employees. We have offices nationwide and are recognized on the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing companies in the US. And we specialize in project consulting, managed services, cloud and hosting services, with all of them backed with a 100% guarantee. GSI also provides a broad spectrum of business, functional, and technical consulting services for Oracle NetSuite, Oracle Cloud, Salesforce, ServiceNow, and other enterprise applications. All right, and now I'd like to turn everything over to John to get into our main presentation.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. Thank you.
All right, thank you everybody for making today's webcast. It's a large webcast. Appreciate all of you joining. This is a very technical session we're going to be going on today. And yes, me as a techie, I actually have been through several Orchestrator installs myself. Even though I've got the VP title, I still get my hands dirty, and this is one of the areas that I've been concentrating on. So I'm going to show you how to actually do an install. We're not going to do one, but you're going to see the screenshots from one, because the actual time would probably take, more like 4 hours, or maybe a little longer if you have connectivity issues. So just want to check, Brooke, and you see my screen, JD Edwards Orchestrator installation?
Yep, okay? I sure can.
Okay, so we'll do just a technical overview. I'm going to, show you some of the MTRs because it's important. And MTRs for Orchestrator have changed more than they have for tools releases. So it's been very aggressive. So I'll give you a checklist of things you need to do. We'll go over the MTRs, Orchestrator installation process, showing you the links. Then we'll get to the Q&A session. Before we get started, though, let's launch a quick poll. We've got some fun here. When do you plan to implement Orchestrator? Already done it? Next 6 months? Next year beyond? Not going to do it? Just unsure. So we'll give you just a minute to answer. So see where people are. I don't expect too many of we've already done it. Maybe it wouldn't be here on this session, but remarkably, that's coming in at 12% right now. So some of you have already done this. We'll give it 30 more seconds, and no, less than that. We've got a good chunk of people have voted already. So let's just close it and get to it. All right. So let's share this. 15% already done it. 35% maybe in the next 6 months. 18%. Look at this though, guys. 0 saying they're not implementing Orchestrator. What does that tell you about Orchestrator and what Oracle has done for you? Really, really awesome product, no doubt about it. What was once just a techie project called IoT Orchestrator has turned into something quite a bit more and more valuable to the company. 32% unsure. So, all right, let's get back to the screen. Let's see if you guys can see my screen. Yes, you can. All right, next screen. Some of this material comes directly from Oracle, and the Oracle has written a lot about it, so there's no reason for me to reinvent the wheel as to what the Orchestrator is. It's basically an integration tool, utilizing the AIS server to transform external data into business processes in EnterpriseOne. Oracle's very first product to use it was their mobile apps. The mobile apps pointing to an AIS server, basically using the AIS server as a background JD Edwards client. That's effectively what you can think of it as. And also, they provided you with this Orchestrator Studio, which allows, I won't say you have to be non-technical, but that's the word I think the industry is saying, is non-technical power users can design their own integrations. But I think you have to have a little bit of, my experience has been that you have to have a little bit of tech savviness and or understanding of data relationships in the tables in order to use Studio exclusively. GSI has a webcast that we've done recorded on the use of the Orchestrator. If you want to see a quick sample of implementing address book via Studio, look back on one of our recorded webcasts. So with Orchestrator, you need to create an Orchestrator, and you need an AIS server, and here are some of the things it tells you that you can do. IoT, of course, that was the very first thing this was released for. It used to be called the IoT Orchestrator. You can use it to extend other solutions, third-party applications, some bank reconciliation programs. You can use it to bring spreadsheets into EnterpriseOne in ways that make it very simple. Basically, a transformational product. So let's talk about the architecture first, because this is what you're going to have to install and what you're going to have to understand. The communications between JD Edwards EnterpriseOne and various AIS servers. So this is a simple architecture where you have, on the right-hand side here, you have your JD Edwards database server, you have your JD Edwards Enterprise server, and you have an HTML server. Already, you need an AIS server to communicate via Orchestrator, so we have that too. And the AIS server is what where the orchestrations starts to run in the background, so to speak, and that communicates out to the rest of the world. So I wanted to, give a best practice recommendation. One of my friends that did a presentation on Orchestrator with me last summer. We did this slide, and we've talked with others. Oracle recommends this. GSI recommends this. Effectively, we're saying is if you have web clients or mobile clients trying to get to EnterpriseOne, might be a good idea to isolate that traffic from other traffic, that the rest of the world, so that your end users, your main JD Edwards end users, are not affected by the performance of the outside activity. Not that this is terribly taxing on the system. You could create an integration that does tax the system, and it's just a good idea to separate it. History has shown us over the last 20 years, those of you that have been in the CNC architecture, you bring in a third-party product, whether it be an integration, whether it be a barcoding solution. Usually it's better to create separate servers and isolate the traffic. Not always. If you're just a 10-person shop, you might not want to do it, but if you're 1,000, very good idea. So the Orchestrator provides critical processing capability for E1 applications. It allows you to consume and process data from devices and other software interfaces. And again, this material comes from Oracle, directly from Oracle. I'm not going to take credit for it. And this demonstration really isn't about what an orchestration is, what a service request, rule, cross-reference, and whitelist. We have a whole webcast on this. You can read about it. You can YouTube. You can go to GSI's website, and we definitely have webcasts that explain exactly what these are, and actually creates a sample for you. Just some of other capabilities. With orchestrations, you can schedule orchestrations, which I could see somebody designing a stress and load testing system with this via some of the really cool tools that you have along with this. There's a process recorder, which so you can design your orchestration without having to know how to write XML type of code. You basically run your application with the process recorder, capturing the commands, and it puts it in a format that's English-like that allows you to build your orchestration without having to know XML. However, down at the bottom, I already mentioned the recorder. You can still do customized code in Java or Groovy, and GSI has used Groovy in the past with its Genius products. So these are common technologies that people know, but the idea is to try to make it so you don't have to get down into the Java or get Groovy. Security is always a concern. I'm not going to get into detail. In my example, I did not set up SSL, but you always want to use SSL in setting up your live system if it's going to go to the outside world. If it's internal, then you have decisions to make. Do you trust the people you're with? Do you care if the data is free-form text over the internet, not or over your local intranet? Maybe you do need it, maybe you don't. Just some advice that I've given people. Use encryption. Never use default passwords. Keep all software updates going best you can. Remain current, and then the end-to-end. Keep the end-to-end approach. I put that one in, and the end-to-end approach means all the way from a device. Let's say you have a temperature probe gathering the temperature of a mixture, a blend mixture that you're making in the wine industry, all the way from that probe up through including your enterprise server and the reports. So the traffic has to go through somewhere, has to communicate somewhere, whether it's a wire or wireless. There's various mechanisms, but think from end to end. Not all sensors have security on them, but I advise you to look for sensors that do have some kind of security protocol, at the very least encryption, but if possible, full security. And there are devices for that, hardware appliances and software appliances. All right, on to the good stuff. Review the latest MTRs. The material that I'm providing today was accurate as of 2 days ago. So I went through and validated that everything I'm showing you today was available and accurate. You need your Orchestrator installation guide. I'll give you the link to that. You need your JD Edwards EnterpriseOne Tools Server Manager guide. Because you're going to have to install WebLogic and BI Publisher on a server of its own, but the EnterpriseOne components are installed via Server Manager. It didn't used to like that. When the Orchestrator first came out 3 years ago, you didn't get that nice little tool. You had to do it manually. You need a JD Edwards EnterpriseOne HTML instance. You already got my advice on that in the best practice picture. Same thing with an AIS instance. Recommending a separate web server for BI Publisher, and that would be the Orchestrator server. You then need to download and install the Orchestrator Studio. The guides that I'm going to show you at the end, I'll have links to the guides, and the guides will lead you towards the versions of the software that you need. Okay, so I've listed the latest MTRs, Orchestrator 7.0.x. This is the latest. I did not get up to the latest because we have not done the 9.2.3 tools release in our lab yet. That was just released either a week or I think it was last Monday. It might have been the Monday before. 9.2.3 is just brand new, and we have not gotten it done and implemented. So what we have done is we have implemented Orchestrator Studio 6.1, 9.2.2.4. Actually, I'm sorry, we're on 9.2.2.5 in our lab. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the WebLogic versions here in a minute. So, and there's various releases, depends on your tools release, what you can do. And I have some advice on that. I'll talk about it a little bit later. And here's some really older releases from 2 years ago. You're probably not faced with installing these. If you are, like if you're installing Orchestrator 2.01, I guarantee you're going to need a consultant to come in and help you, somebody that's done it, unless you've done installs and upgrades and really understand the JD Edwards architecture, you probably would need help. It's not as easy as it is now. Okay, just a few things. Through installing the EnterpriseOne Orchestrator Studio 5.0 through Server Manager. Prior to that, you installed it through executables and using GUIs and moving XML files around manually. So just some hints on what release can work with what. These are tools releases, not apps releases. Tools 9212, Orchestrator 5, 922 base, up to 9222, because 223 was never released. Or you can use 601, 9224, 5, and 6. You use Orchestrator 6.1 and 923. I would highly recommend Orchestrator 7.x. You need to be on Studio 6.1 or higher to get all of the good tools, the process recorder, the scheduler. I mean, it's almost a must. And honestly, if you want the Orchestrator, in some cases, I've actually recommended places you apply a tools release. And I get that tools release can be painful in some cases, depending upon, whoops, not sure how that happened. Went by real fast, sorry about that. Tools releases may or may not be easy for you. So Orchestrator Studio was built with Oracle Application Development Framework. And ADF must be deployed on a WebLogic server with ADF. So I've already told you must have an AIS server. Oracle, GSI, and others recommend 2 AIS server, one for testing and one for production use. So this is just, in doing the installation, this is just a requirement. For an AIS server deployed on WebLogic server, there's an additional requirement that enables the tool for testing orchestration. So you need to, you basically need to click on that link from Oracle and follow that process. It's just editing a file, an XML file, and saving it off. Okay, so here's something to consider. Many of you might be faced with this issue. If you're on WebLogic Server 12.1.3, you have to install Oracle WebLogic Server and then configure it with the runtime libraries for Oracle ADF. Personally, I'm going to tell you that's a pain in the neck. If you're using Oracle Fusion Middleware 12.2.1.2 or higher to install it, it comes pre-configured with ADF support, and you do not need those runtime libraries. So if you're trying to use an existing WebLogic server that's on 12.1.3, I say, hey guys, stand up another server. Make that one a 12.2.1. Your other HTML server can stay on 12.1.3. It doesn't matter, but put your new server, put your new Orchestrator instance on 12.1.2. So we could probably have a half-hour to 45-minute call talking about the releases of WebLogic Server and where you're at and what you would recommend. But just, if feasible, I would say stand up a new server and install the 12.2.1.2 version. Investigate carefully if it's backwardly compatible with your release of WebLogic Server that you're using. If you're on 12.1.3, I know you can do it, but double check and move forward with that. All right. What's the first thing that we need to do? I did a bunch of screenshots. Actually, one of GSI's guys, Al Hotchkiss, did this for me, so I'm going to give him credit for doing it. I have done this myself. And I'm going to take you through, click by click, of how to get an install. Hopefully you don't find it boring, but I personally think it's a great reference point. I could just skip through to the end, but I'll go through one and explain some of the processes. The first thing you need to do is install the ADF foundation on your WebLogic server. GSI used Linux. The file that you download is a jar file, therefore it's a Java archive, therefore you need Java. So, or you need to do your homework on the proper versions of Java that you need to have installed. on this. And the links that I provide you at the end take you to the guides that will guide you for that. So this basically we did Java jar, and we ran the executable here. So we had clicked the next. We click on next to skip auto updates. Basically, you have to pick an Oracle home, just like many other Oracle products, the database, EnterpriseOne now. WebLogic requires a home. In this case, Al was using Windows, not Linux, and he just picked /Oracle middleware, whatever your drive letter is, if it's Windows, or mount point if it's Linux. Usually we put it in U01 /U01 as the location, Oracle middleware. I usually stick with that format. Okay, basically just make sure that you choose the Fusion middleware infrastructure and click next. Sorry, it's a little fuzzy, folks. When you get the document itself, you can read it okay, exactly what to do. You can see here it's checking the version of Java, and you know we actually have a question mark here. So the version of Java actually ended up being okay in this case. So we just clicked next. The installer was just a little obsolete, and it wasn't an issue. So after you get to this screen installing the middleware infrastructure, again, this is going to install all of these things: WebLogic Server, TopLink Developer, Enterprise Manager. This is all that's going to be installed on this, along with the ADF components. Then you click the install button. So this is the time where you can, go get a cup of coffee, make some phone calls. It's going to take about 15 minutes, half hour to poke through all of this. Fortunately, we don't have to. We're done. We're you want to look at the installation completed successfully. Now, some issues I had in installing the Linux version. I think oftentimes you have problems with the GUI because it is a GUI running on Linux. I did struggle a bit with getting the files installed because we used Oracle Enterprise Linux, and I had to make sure that I had the keys all set up to log in. And once I got through all that, it wasn't a big deal. I did have problems with display quality messages popped up. Also, you need to have a big enough temp file. My temp volume was too small, so I had to and the validation checker caught that. Be careful on, I skipped it on the Java version because I knew it was okay. But if you get warning messages, don't do it. Look at everyone and make sure it's okay. If you see you don't have enough temp space, guess what? You better get the temp space fixed before you do the install. Okay, so now the main components are the material is installed. What happens next? Well, there's a repository, and this is a database repository. And you can store the ADF repository either in SQL Server or in Oracle. If you're on IBM DB2, or excuse me, if you're on iSeries and you want to do this, you're going to have access to an Oracle database or a SQL Server database in order to install it. So creating the repository used to be a challenge for me. I don't know why, but now it's not a big deal. And this basically ran automatically from the last installer. You have to tell it the database information, and basically, just click next and OK. You want to make sure you include all of those components. The Oracle repository components, you want to put all of those, and you want to put some kind of a prefix in front of it. And you can see the schema owner in this case is going to be prod_mbs prod_wls, so that if you want a development and a production repository, you can create multiple repositories, each having a different prefix. And this is how you would do it. It creates different schemas in your database. So click next and then click OK. All right, I talked about the prefixes already, so just look it over, make sure it's okay, and then click create. Now, one thing you need to be worried about, when you put in the password, make sure you remember the password. Most people, let me back up one. Let's back up two. And one of these you have to enter the password down below here. That just gets you access to the database. But when you configure the repository, you are prompted to enter database password. You want to make sure that when you put the password in, that you remember what you put it. Now you'll notice you've got the schema name here, and you got the default database that's being created. So you want to make sure that you take a screen print of this if you're a DBA and want to know what's going on and what's being stored where. So basically there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 databases, a couple of them with the same name going in different schemas, so they have different purposes. All right, and then of course at the end there's log file, and you can see the component log. You can view it from here, the rcu.log. If you had errors or just want to poke around to see what commands were executed to create the repository, there's a lot to be learned from clicking on this rcu.log. That whole process takes about half an hour. All right, so you still got some more work to do. You've installed the WebLogic basic components. You've created your RCU. Now you have to configure WebLogic Administration. Basically, you're going to create a new domain. If you're on an existing web server, you would not be, you still need to create a new domain, but you'd have to pick the location. You probably would use something that is located in the same folder as you've got your other domain. Maybe you're using it for your main EnterpriseOne HTML. I don't like that idea though. I like keeping the WebLogic process separate from HTML process because it's got slightly different components installed. You can do it. You can do a single server, but I'd say this is not the place to be skimping on servers. All right. So basically, you want to select the Oracle Java runtime features. And then click next, and you'll see JRF. If you sign into the WebLogic console, you'll see the JRF get created. Basically, you just click next on the application location. You have to tell it who your WebLogic user, what user is going to be used for creating this domain. Generally speaking, we just keep it WebLogic, and the password, whatever you happen to select. Make sure you remember what it is. You want to make sure you select production components. You don't want all of the bloatware for development. And normally this JDK, it says Oracle Hotspot, normally it finds the right JDK, but if you have multiple JDKs installed on your machine, you might have to change the JDK. I've never had to do it. I've poked around to see what it meant. When I saw Oracle Hotspot, I'm like, oh, I didn't think they called it Hotspot anymore. So, or I thought that was called, it was called JRocket there for a while. So I was confused, and I just started poking around and just realized it finds the one that it thinks is valid. Usually you just click next. So you have to enter the RCU database information here. So here's where you need to make sure that you that you've got the right thing. And you click on the Get RCU Config button right here in the middle. It should go out and grab the RCU based on the type of database and the driver mechanism. So you should just have to click next, hopefully. If not, if you have a problem, you probably need to go manually type in the schema owners from that screen I asked you to print out before and the password. So click next. All right, complete the schema owner. If not populated, this should come in pre-populated for you with when you did the Get RCU config, it should have pulled in the passwords. Click next. test connections. I think it's a good idea to test the connections. If all 5 of those connections connect just fine, you're going to have no problems with the install. So for the installation of WebLogic and configuration, you want to add the administrative server, and then of course you need the node manager. Just like on your web install, you have that on that side as well. So click those 2, then click next. Then you can select. Hold on a second. I have a note on this. If you have only one environment, then you want to use 7001. But if you have different environment, more than one environment that you wish to use on the server, have multiple instances, then you want to increment the value for each time. So basically, you're creating an admin server and a node manager listening on port 7001. You would maybe do 7002 for dev. I don't know. It depends on your implementation how you want to do that. But just click next. I do apologize, folks. When I was looking at these screen prints, they're nice and crispy on my workstation. They're just not on the GoToWebinar. My apologies for the quality here. On this one, you're going to leave the node manager type as the top for domain default location. You want to put in WebLogic and whatever your password was for the node manager credentials. You just want to look things over here, make sure everything looks good. Probably all you want to do is click create. And then you wait about 15 minutes and you click next, and then you're done. Okay, so you want to take note of these 2 things: the domain location. You may need that folder if you're going to make some changes to some of the XML files. You want to put your password into your security.xml, etc. And also it gives you the admin server URL. So in this case, it was JDE ORC 7001 console. So that's the administrative console. I usually bookmark it. You do seem to have to get into it on occasion. Server Manager should take care of everything. But if you have problems with Server Manager and you need to remove an instance for some reason, make sure you know that address. Pretty easy to remember. Just your machine name, 7:7001 console, or whatever port you chose in the installation process. So I just wanted to show you GSI's reference architecture in Server Manager. So this is what our implementation looks like. We have labs in Oracle Cloud, we have a lab in Amazon, and we have a lab in Microsoft Azure. This one right here is a lab that's in Amazon Web Services. So basically, I have a single enterprise server. I have 2 JAS servers. One for running my instances and my AIS server, and then I have a second one that I'm using strictly for the Orchestrator Studio. Then, of course, I have my Server Manager console, this OC1, and I have my deployment server. So this is a reference architecture. I don't have a production environment set up yet. This is just a test environment. So I have DV and PY. I have 1 enterprise server, 1 AIS instance, because I'm not using AIS for anything but the Orchestrator. So I have an Oracle WebLogic server separate with the Orchestrator Studio running as a JVM. Just some configuration help out here. You have to configure the JD Edwards HTML server. It has to have something in it for allowed hosts, what protocols, and what port to accept traffic on. So basically, you're telling the JD Edwards web server that there's going to be something else like the AIS server connecting in on it. So you could, in this case, put allowed host star, meaning unlock traffic coming in from anything. If you want to do better security, perhaps you only put in right into that allowed host, put the AIS server in it so that the only other server that can talk to it is this one. So I'd say as a security guy, we probably should do that. In fact, I probably will do that on our web server, on our lab when we're done. I did only do HTTP. Sorry, folks, it wouldn't have mattered for this demo anyway, whether I did S or P. But I didn't do this. I didn't do encrypted traffic. So, I don't know why I tend to put port numbers in for values. I guess I'm old school, and I remember name services and how they work. And I know that, basically if you put in a value, it's going to skip name services and go right to the IP address, and could perform a little better, one or two less name service lookups occurring there, and then the port number. In my case, I just installed the AIS server on port 8090. It was just a random port I chose. I like to use high ports just because low ports are generally hacked often by hackers. So let's see. Next one is the AIS server configuration. So the AIS server also needs to be configured basically to the HTML server. So it's basically it's itself. I mean, the AIS server and the dev instance are on the same box. So I put the IP address in to avoid named services, and I use port 8082 for DV in encrypted traffic. And I think the rest of you, if you know everything about EnterpriseOne, you know what roles are in the environment. So we'll skip all that. The Orchestrator Studio also has to be configured to point back to the AIS server. So this Orchestrator Studio, if you remember, is on a different machine. It's on the JDE Jazz 02, whereas the DV and AIS instance are on JDE Jazz 01. So, but I pointed back traffic type and everything. So it tells basically AIS server to or Studio which machine to look at. Now these can be virtual IPs. In this instance, I just did a single server implementation. I did not design a highly available architecture or a scaled architecture for the demo here. So this can be a VIP. There are some things to be cautious about VIPs, virtual IPs. So but I think most of you understand how a virtual IP works. So back to port 8090. So after that, hopefully everything that I've done is working, and you'll have a link to the Orchestrator Studio, and that's what you would give to your power user, or if you're a CNC person that wants to play around and start creating some orchestrations yourself to see how it works, you go to that link. That's the studio. That's where you do your designs. The AIS server is where the final design product will end up being run, and you can test your orchestrations with the studio client. I tell everybody the studio client just kind of emulates an IoT device. Think of the Orchestrator Studio as something external to EnterpriseOne, and you'll notice the link here, 8090 JDE REST. That kind of implies that it's using a REST-based architecture, and it is. REST with JSON it's a common format. Many other tools, Salesforce uses it, ServiceNow uses it. So with that in mind, the fact that it uses REST-based communications and that other tools use REST-based communication, you can see how it might be somewhat simple to design an orchestration that points something outside to JD Edwards inside. So keep those links in mind. Remember what port number you installed them on. 7075 was something I picked when I did the install, as was 8090. I promised you a bunch of key links at the beginning. And I've got this all in the document. I've got document IDs. I've got link. Installation of JD Edwards Orchestrator components. These are predefined Orchestrator components that Oracle has already produced for you. How about that? Not only do you get this awesome tool, but they have some orchestrations that they've created for you, and good place to start if you want to look at some samples and dig around. So I highly advise looking at that. Orchestrator Studio issues. If there are problems with the Studio, this is the link to get you to that. Or excuse me, I didn't put the link in. I gave you the doc ID. 210491.2.1 is the Orchestrator Studio issues. And it's just a bunch of issues. I had problem A, here's solution. Problem B, solution, etc. You need the JD Edwards EnterpriseOne Tools Orchestrator Guide in order to poke around and understand that particular program and use it. You need the Tools Server Manager Guide. So you've got to have that because Chapter 21 teaches you how to load the orchestrator. It's no different than any other component that you install in Server Manager. You download the PAR file from Oracle, you upload it, you distribute it to the server, and then you go through. You're going to have to assign create a JVM on the back end to work with. Then you install the components, and basically you click create, and 15 minutes later it's there. You also probably want to look at the JD Edwards EnterpriseOne AIS Server Reference Guide. And I mentioned in the beginning that you needed this link before you get started with the whole process, or before you start using the Studio. You need to enable HTTP basic authentication. So follow that link as well. All right, so let's see, Brooke, how much time do we have left? We're doing good. We got 5 minutes, don't we?
Oh yeah.
All right,
yeah, we have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Hold on a second. Since we got 5 minutes, I will pull up. I'll pull up our implementation and maybe poke around a little bit here. So this is just GSI's implementation. It's a little hard to see on the screen here, so might not be the best, but basically, tell you what I'm going to do, folks. I'm going to switch screens. My other screen here is a lot easier to see, so let me switch screens. All right. That's a little bigger, right? A little better?
Yep,
all right.
Better.
Okay, so now we can see this is our reference architecture here. Now it's been a bit since I've been in it, so I'm sure it's going to time out here and I'll have to sign in, but that's okay. I'm clicking on the AIS instance. Just getting through it a bit. Yeah, of course, I'm sure I was timed out. I'll just click in there. So you can see I've got my AIS server. There's nothing really all that fun right there. But what I want to show you is I want to get into the Orchestrator instance. Oops, still firing. That's because I hit back. I wanted to hit home. All right, we'll get into the Orchestrator instance. Notice I've got it. I just call it ORCH920. I'm going to get into that instance and just show you what you can do inside of it, since this is about the Orchestrator, and then we'll wrap up. Notice there is some logging here. So this isn't one of those places where Oracle has gotten the logs. The logging is actually pretty new here on these tools. So they're going to expand that a little more. But what I wanted to show you, yeah, I'm running Orchestrator 6.1. Right here, I've got this link here to the JD Jazz 7075. This is where you can find the link to your Studio if you forget it. Go inside of your Orchestrator instance, and then you can create it. So I wanted to quickly click on this because there's one thing I want to show you inside of this. Yeah, you got to authenticate to it. Absolutely. And I have my password here. And I wanted to show it to you. So this is basically where you create your orchestrations, where you implement your notifications, etc. But I want to quickly show you, since this is just a technical side, this is usually what you give to your developer or your power users. Like, here you go, folks. If you see these boxes grayed out and you're able to get in, the problem you're having is with security. You take on the newer releases of 9.2, you've got to implement UDO security. And orchestrations are UDOs. So you have to open up UDOs. So if you see gray and you can't run any of these, I'm going to give you a 9 times out of 10 that it's EnterpriseOne security. So take a note there, folks. Gray boxes inside Studio, E1 security. But I clicked on the tool button on the Orchestrator Studio, and what I wanted to do was I wanted to show you that you can find the Orchestrator client. So if you forget the link, this is how you find the Orchestrator client. So we've got two links here. We've got the Studio, which is where you do the design, and the client, that's where you sign in and actually test orchestrations. And you can see, you know, it does look a little techy. JSON input, that is very techy, and that's why, you know, clearing XML caches and all that. That's why I do think you have to have a little bit of technical savvy. Oracle is saying power users, yeah, okay, but it wouldn't hurt to have a programming background at all, or have access to you know, a person who understands XML, understands JSON. It certainly doesn't hurt. But that's all I really wanted to show you folks. Brooke, I'm going to turn it back to you. This isn't this isn't a class on how to use Orchestrator. It was how to get it installed. And now we have a working system.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. That was great. All right. Can you see my screen okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. That was great. I would just want to I would like to cover a few follow-up items, and then we will move into our question and answer section of our webcast. Our webcast today is part of GSI's free ongoing educational webcast series on JD Edwards, and our upcoming webcasts are currently listed on the screen. And to view our most up-to-date schedule, please visit us at getgsi.com/webcast. Also, don't forget to join us at the Southern California Regional User Group meeting on December 6th, as well as the Houston Regional User Group meeting on the 6th as well. GSI provides extensive free educational resources for the JD Edwards community, including our weekly educational webcast, monthly newsletter called the GSI Insider, online resource center where you can access our on-demand webcast, white papers, and we also offer on-site and virtual workshops. And if you'd like to sign up for any of our weekly email reminders for upcoming webcasts, our monthly newsletter, or create an account to access our resource center, you can go to getgsi.com, go to platforms. On the main menu, select the appropriate platform, which is JD Edwards, and you see it here on the left, and then you can click newsletter, webcasts, or resources. All right, I see we've had several questions submitted online, and I would just like to remind everyone that if you would like to submit a question, you can still do so through the GoToWebinar console window on the right of your screen. And if you minimized your console earlier, please click the left-facing arrow key to redisplay the question panel. All right, let's see here. All right. Our first question, John, is from Melissa, and she says, is it still safe to avoid the .o release as in 9.2.3.0?
Great question, Melissa. I have to watch what I say. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings at Oracle, but I'd say it'd be prudent for me to advise you to avoid a .0 tools release. I would probably wait until you see 9.2.3.1. Let some of the bugs come out. I mean, I'm not saying, it doesn't say that Oracle's testing isn't thorough, but the 9.2.3 not only does it support the Orchestrator Studio 7.0, it's the 64-bit version, enterprise server, and also, you know, doing multi-foundation via server manager. There's some changes there. I guess I would advise you personally to hold off till the .1.
Okay, great. All right. And our next question is from Mark, and he says, how does UX1 interact with this, and is UX1 required for this as well?
Oh, interesting question, Mark. This is completely unrelated to UX1. UX1 is user interface 1, and I think maybe where the tie comes in, and I'm just going to take a guess, UX1 requires an AIS server. So maybe that's where the tie-in comes in. But Orchestrator requires an AIX server as well. But I don't. Other than that, I don't see how they cross paths. Unrelated.
Okay. All right. And our next question is from Suman, and he says, "Is the database schema for repository required for Orchestrator?"
Is the database? What was the question again?
Is database schema for repository required for the Orchestrator?
Absolutely, Suman. It is definitely. You definitely have to have a database schema. Absolutely.
Okay, and then this is a follow-up question from Suman as well, and he says, "What are the supported versions of database that can be used for the repository? Can we use Oracle Database Client 32-bit? We are an iSeries shop."
I don't know if you can use the 32. No, you know what? I know for sure that it's 64-bit. Suman, you'd have to install the 64-bit client, and you can have both the 32 and the 64-bit on the same workstation. You just have to make sure the 32-bit appears first in the search string for the local, if you're running a local client, and then point your client. Well, you know, you're only gonna put the client on the server anyway, so it's not going to be needed from a workstation. My guess is you're going to be installing it from a client, unless you've got a separate DBA that's going to run it separately from that. I would suggest going to the MTR page though to get the exact supported versions. There's a bunch of them. There are various flavors of SQL Server. There are various flavors of Oracle. So I don't want to. I can't possibly list all those right now without going to do an MTR search off the top of my head. But it is a 64-bit app. You'll need 64-bit.
Okay, great. Thanks, John. And our last question we have from Trevor, and he says, "Is Orchestrator installable and fully functional installing with WebSphere iSeries platforms with no Oracle database BlueStack? I see you only mentioned WebLogic."
WebLogic server is a requirement for this, Trevor. It's an absolute requirement. So you'd have to contact Oracle for how to go about doing this. The repository can reside in SQL Server or Oracle, but WebLogic server is absolutely required because of the BI components. The BI components that are needed to run, it's basically the Orchestrator Studio. Let me think about this. The Orchestrator Studio for sure. I'm not sure runtime on AIS server. You might be able to get away without it for runtime, but definitely Studio's got to have WebLogic server.
Okay, great. And then we have one more question come in from Sonali. And the question is, "Can you explain about JDK and ADF and JDeveloper?"
Yeah, no problem. JDK is Java Development Kit. So it's basically, JDKs also include the JRE, which is the Java Runtime Environment. So JDK includes the Java Runtime Environment, but also the kit a lot for development. ADF is Application Development Framework from Oracle. It's basically, yeah, I guess it's a framework for developing developing programs and applications. So it's somewhat self-defining. JDeveloper is Oracle, an Oracle tool for developing Java applications. So I hope that's a high-level answer.
Okay, great. Awesome. Thank you so much, John. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for your questions, and John, for your answers today, as well as a wonderful presentation. As a follow-up from today's webcast, we ask that you complete a short 1-minute survey when you exit. You will be receiving an email with a link to our resource center on our website where you can access the recording from today's webcast, as well as a copy of the presentation. And after today's webcast, we will do a drawing for the $25 Amazon gift card, and anyone that attended the entire webcast will be eligible, and we will notify the winner. And if you have any follow-up questions, you can contact John or I. And our contact information was listed on the previous screen here in the questions and answers. And thank you everybody again for attending, and John for your great presentation, and we hope that you all have a great day.
Thanks, Brooke. You have a good day too.
Thanks. Bye.